So let's talk about one of the true giants of literature, Gabriel García Márquez's 100 Years of Solitude. It's a book that's hailed as an absolute masterpiece, but let's be real, it can also be a beast to get through. Our goal here is pretty simple. We're going to try to unravel that mystery and show you how all of its impossible magic actually tells one of the truest stories you'll ever read. Okay, just to set the stage, the praise for this novel is, well, it's absolutely staggering. I mean, when it came out, critics weren't just saying it was good. They were putting it on the same level as the Book of Genesis, one of the foundational texts of Western civilization. It was seen as this monumental achievement, a book that really changed the game. But then there's the experience of actually reading it. And if you've ever picked it up and just felt totally overwhelmed, confused, or honestly just kind of depressed, trust me, you are not alone. This comment right here from a Reddit user just nails that feeling. You're trying to keep track of generations of people, most of whom have the same name, all those Orellanos and Jose Arcadios, right? And the whole thing feels like this beautiful but endless cycle of tragedy. It really makes you wonder, okay, what am I missing here? And that, right there, is the central puzzle of the whole book, isn't it? It's a huge paradox. How on earth can a story where people literally float up to heaven, where a plague makes you forget words, and where yellow butterflies are just constantly following a guy, how can that story be one of the deepest, truest reflections of a continent's reality? Well, let's find out. All right, first things first, we need to travel to the place at the heart of it all, the mythical, isolated town of Macondo. It's home to a family whose destiny, you could say, was written in the stars from the very beginning.
So at its core, this whole thing is a family saga. We follow 7 generations of the Buendía family, starting with the patriarch Jose Arcadio Buendía. He founds this town, Macondo, which is kind of like this perfect, isolated little bubble, and it becomes a stage, a microcosm, where the entire sprawling, chaotic history of a continent is going to play out in miniature.
And it all kicks off with, wow. I mean, this has got to be one of the most famous opening lines in the history of literature. And it does something completely brilliant right from the jump. It just shatters our whole sense of time. In one single sentence, we are in the present, staring down a firing squad, and we're also way back in the past, remembering this incredible moment of childhood wonder. And look, this isn't just the author showing off his writing skills. This happens all through the book. He creates this dizzying, circular feeling of time, where everything seems like it's already happened and is still happening all at once. It gives you this heavy, powerful sense that the Buendía family is just trapped, stuck in a loop they can never, ever escape. So what do you call this kind of storytelling? Well, it has a name, and honestly, it is the key to unlocking this whole book. We're talking about a genre that this novel basically perfected, magical realism. So what in the world is magical realism? Well, think of it like this. The most insane, impossible, fantastical things happen, but nobody bats an eye. The characters and the narrator just treat it all as perfectly normal, like just another Tuesday. The supernatural isn't shocking. It's just part of the fabric of everyday life. And the story behind this style is actually pretty charming. Garcia Marquez said he basically learned it from his grandmother. She would tell him these absolutely bonkers stories about ghosts and omens and all sorts of wild things. But she'd do it with a totally straight face, so matter-of-factly that as a kid, he just believed her. And that's the exact tone of this book. The magic feels real because it's told like it's real. Okay, let me just throw a few examples at you so you can really get it. For starters, a plague of insomnia hits the whole town. But it's not just that they can't sleep, they start forgetting everything. People forget the names for things, so they have to go around putting little labels on everything. Table, cow, clock. It's completely bizarre, but it's treated like a legitimate public health crisis. Or how about this one? There's a character named Remedios the Beauty. She is so innocent and pure, she barely seems human. Then, one afternoon, while she's outside helping to fold the white bed sheets, poof! A gust of wind just picks her and the sheets up, and she floats away into the sky, never to be seen again. And her family, they're more annoyed that they lost a good set of bed sheets than they are shocked by the literal miracle they just witnessed. And then there's this guy, Mauricio Babylonia, a mechanic who is literally always surrounded by a cloud of yellow butterflies. It's not a special occasion, it's not a big deal, it's just his thing. The magic becomes his defining, ordinary trait. Okay, so yellow butterflies, floating women, memory plagues. What is the point? Is this all just weird for the sake of being weird? No, not at all. And what we're about to get into is, for my money, the single most important part of this entire book. The magic isn't an escape from reality. It's a way of looking reality straight in the eye. This is the big secret. All that magic, it's a code. Every single strange, impossible thing that happens in this book is a powerful metaphor. Garcia Marquez is using these fantastical images to talk about the real, brutal, and often completely surreal history of Latin America. A history so extreme that just telling it realistically wouldn't even begin to do it justice. Let me show you exactly what I mean. In the book, Colonel Aureliano Buendía fights in 32 separate civil wars. 32! And he loses every single one. It sounds absurd, this endless, pointless conflict. Well, it's a direct reflection of real history, specifically Colombia's Thousand Days War, this absolutely devastating conflict between the country's two main political parties that felt just as cyclical and senseless to the people living through it. But the real gut punch, the moment where this all clicks into place, comes late in the book with an American banana company. The workers on the plantation go on strike to demand better conditions. The army gets called in. They gather all the strikers, men, women, and children, in the town square, and they open fire, killing over 3,000 people. But the magical part isn't the killing, it's what happens next. When a survivor tries to tell people what he saw, everyone denies it. The government, the newspapers, they all say nothing happened. It's completely wiped from the official record, erased from history. And that's because it did happen. It's based on the very real 1928 Banana Massacre, where the Colombian army, working with the American-owned United Fruit Company, murdered an unknown number of striking workers and then just covered it all up. The most unbelievable act of magic in the book, making 3,000 bodies disappear from memory, wasn't magic at all. It was history. It was politics. And this feeling, it's not some dusty historical footnote. It's a living reality for many people. Just look at this quote from a Reddit user in Honduras, a country that knows all about the power of these banana republics. They said, "We're gaslit constantly, and the truth gets covered up." That feeling of being told that what you saw with your own eyes, what you know happened, isn't real, that's the very heart of the experience Garcia Marquez was writing about. So where does that leave us? Why is this bizarre, tragic, and beautiful book so incredibly important, even today? Well, it's about what happens when you finally give a voice to stories and people that have been systematically silenced. You know, for a long, long time, the story of Latin America was mostly told by outsiders, by colonizers and historians from other places. 100 Years of Solitude was a game changer because it was the continent telling its own story in its own language. And that language was one where myths, magic, and brutal reality weren't separate things. They were all tangled up together. It validated a reality that the rest of the world often thought was just too outsized to be believed. And you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to what Garcia Marquez himself said when he accepted the Nobel Prize. He said that the reality of Latin America is so extreme and so full of contrasts that writers there barely need to use their imagination. The real problem, he said, has always been finding a way to make their own lives believable to everyone else. And that struggle, that feeling of not being seen or understood in your own truth, that, he said, is the crux of our solitude. The way this book ends is just as unforgettable as how it begins. A prophecy that has been hanging over the family for a century finally comes true. The very last member of the Buendía family finally cracks the code of an old manuscript and realizes he's reading the entire history of his family, foretold from start to finish. And in that exact moment, as he's reading the final lines, a hurricane hits and literally erases the entire town of Macondo from the face of the earth. Just gone. And the final line of the book is, it's a punch to the gut. It's a haunting warning that races condemned to 100 years of solitude don't get a second chance on Earth. The Buendías were trapped in that repeating, tragic loop because they only understood their own history at the exact moment it was all being destroyed. So it leaves us with one last massive question, doesn't it? If a history is erased, if it's denied, if it's forgotten, is a people doomed to just repeat it forever?